Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the main event. You're back with me, Daniel.
And Aaron.
Aaron, we're flying through these now. One to Group C. I have noticed that I do some weird things on this podcast with my face sometimes. I don't know, have you noticed anything about yourself constantly looking at a video whilst you're talking?
I try not to look at myself when I talk. I tend to look at... I just look at what I'm about to say next.
Yeah,
to make sure I don't mess up.
But I look at you and you're just above me, so I can see, I can't really see my features because I'm just looking at you like I'm talking to you, like we're in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously when I do some things, I can then just see my face beneath, getting really self-conscious about it. But it's been enjoyable so far. We're on to Group C. Another exciting group. We do have an English team in this group, which I think you're going to take the lead on anyway. But obviously, we haven't really had to do much research for this one. And I think we should probably spend the least amount of time on this one. Because I think naturally, whether these were English or not, it's the most confusing team in the entire competition as it is. But also, everyone knows about them. So do you want to take us away on Manchester City?
I would love to. So Manchester City, I mean, they're kind of what you always say, they are a trap. You just don't know what Man City you're going to get on any given week. You don't know who's going to play. You don't know what formation they're going to use, especially in the Champions League, because Pep throws all sorts of craziness at the Champions League, and you just don't know. And so this team, it's going to be hard, and I wouldn't base your whole team around Man City players, because although it can pay off, it can also go the complete opposite way and none of them play. So they've had an okay start of the season, except from the battering that they got from Leicester City at home. And I feel like the transfers that they got in at the end were just panic buys to kind of appease the fans. Ruben Diaz and Laporte, I'm sure, will be good, but I don't think that is that's going to solve their defensive issues. It's not going to have the same effect on them as it will Van Dijk had on Liverpool. And I think they're just going to keep relying on the same methodology that they've always had, where if we keep the ball as long as we can, they're not going to be able to attack. So possession is the best form of defense in Man City's point of view. And you've got Phil Foden kind of becoming a more regular starter. But I think one of the biggest things about this team right now is that Gabriel Jesus and Aguero are coming off injuries. So can any of them be trusted to be put in your team? Because there's a quick turnaround after the international break to then they're going to play a Premier League game, and then it's straight away Champions League. I don't think they're going to have a turnaround. So I think the team that you've seen Man City play, where either Mahrez or Sterling is the striker, I think you're going to see that in the Champions League for the first game. I don't think they'll rush a striker back for two games quick, because I think they're focusing on catching Liverpool. And because I think they believe that over 6 games that they'll finish top of this
particular group. Yeah.
So
I think as well with Aguero and Jesus, when they come back, I can see Pep. Curse me for saying this, because anyone that tries to guess what Pep Guardiola is going to do is a fool. So at the risk of sounding foolish, the most logical thing to do would be to start one of them in the league and one in the Champions League, and then they get a full week's worth of recovery every single week. And for me, I want to see what way around that is. And I'm looking at that as well from an FPL standpoint, because I've got my moves already in my head to go to Aguero, because it's just insane not to have him if he's playing. in the league. But I think Aguero's a much better Premier League striker than he's a Champions League striker. I don't think his Champions League record's particularly great. Whereas I think Jesus is might be a little better. He's all right. I think I can see Aguero playing in the league and Jesus playing in the Champions League. And at 9.5 million or for Jesus and 10 for Aguero, they're amazingly priced. I think they're priced at that point because the game also doesn't know what way Pep's going to go. I think once we've seen the first game, and especially if that striker performs, and that doesn't just mean goals, because I think Jesus, what we've seen from Man City in the league so far is Jesus does so much work to subsidise other players. And without him there, they've been a little bit of a mess, both in the press and in the transitional play up front. Everything seems to be side to side, Mahrez to Sterling. Sterling or Mahrez having to fake 6 shots in a row before getting one away or passing it sideways, and a little bit bereft of ideas and a striker's movement up there. Mm-hmm. So either way, if I had to guess, I'd go with whoever's going to play the first game in the Champions League. That'll be the striker for the group stage. Injuries, either one of them obviously could affect that. While the Premier League striker will stick to the Premier League, just because the games come so thick and fast, and they're still obviously in other competitions. So it's going to be like a mad season where there's so many games at once. It makes sense to kind of just split your team in two. I think the other player that I've got in here is Gundogan. I think Gundogan's going to be a Champions League player because he has a much better record in the Champions League than the Premier League as well. 6.5 million. The role he plays, it's 6.5 million is actual value in the Champions League game. If this was the FPL, you wouldn't go anywhere near him. But because you get recovery points, and because he is handy with a goal every so often, that if you get him and he hits, that could be really good value. Mm-hmm. His value shouldn't be that high, in my opinion, because he was their penalty taker. It was like between him and Aguero, but now KDB is the penalty taker. So unless he's not starting, and then Aguero's not starting, like it goes down too much, because when Jesus starts, Gundogan's the penalty taker. But for Gundogan to get in ahead of Aguero and KDB, I think it's a step too far. But if you see if you see these players not playing, then yeah, I think Gundogan at 6.5 million to be a penalty taker isn't the worst shout in the world if you're looking for a player within that price point. Mm-hmm. But they've just been so inconsistent. Obviously, they've won 3 games, lost 1 and drawn 1. Not really, the standards that we'd expect of Man City. The 1-1 draw to Leeds was a farce of a game. It's one of the best games I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was good. It was good.
It was just so enjoyable. It wasn't enjoyable having KDB as captain, but I didn't really care watching it. I was just like, I don't know how it ended 1-1. Obviously, some of those wins, like that 3-0 win, is a Carabao Cup win against lower league opposition. So that's skewing the data a little bit. Obviously, getting beat 5-2 off Leicester. I think they're actually even lucky to beat Wolves 3-1, because that second half, Jimenez missed a couple of sitters, and Podence missed a sitter. Like that they could have lost that game 3-2. It seems to be they get off to a good start and fail. And when it comes to the defenders, we can talk about them all day long, but at their price, would you not just rather have another team's defenders?
Pretty much. I don't think you can trust Man City's defense, even in an easy game.
Yeah. And that goes off all of last season. We support a team that I think had one of the lowest XGs in the league last year, who really struggled for goals. I think eventually we managed to overtake Norwich on goals scored, because Norwich fell off a cliff. And even we scored 2 goals past them at home. So defensively, it doesn't just come down to the back four. Obviously, Fernandinho moving into centre mid is much better, because he wasn't a very good centre back, and they really missed him. And holding midfield, because it's usually him that gets to the ball to stop long shots. Rodri isn't a good central defensive midfielder. for such a tall person, he doesn't have very much pace. For such a big person, he's not very strong. And he doesn't block long shots, which is why we've talked about this all last year on this podcast. Man City's record for conceding long-range shots is pretty embarrassing. Then you've got, like, obviously Rodri is capable of a goal, and he might. So as a fantasy asset in UCL, he's actually might be quite handy. But as a player to sit in front of a back four, if you want a defender, he's not very useful. Then, yeah, like I say, the press is just all off, and with them not having a striker, defenses don't feel so under pressure without Aguero and Jesus there, so they're making less mistakes. And just feel so the team, I think, when Aguero and Jesus are back, we'll see a Man City team more like themselves. But until that happens, I'll be staying clear of them for this. Did you have any other players that you thought might be useful?
I know that, like I mentioned before, Foden, but I think he's gonna, if they do split their team into the two, I think that Foden would be more in the Premier League team, and Mahrez would be the right mid for the Champions League team. So no, I not really, because right backs, I just don't know. I know Cancelo played last year in the last few Champions League games, but with how sporadic Mendy is, Cancelo might as well be the left back. I think Kyle Walker right back. So I don't know. It's hard to. There's no one I would bank on.
Just thinking about it in my head there as well, I just thought another thing that Pep could do. He could play, the weekend game, then keep a very similar team, maybe just change a couple of bit part players for the Tuesday or Wednesday game, whilst, the levels are up, and then drop them for the next weekend game to then play that sort of similar team again for the Tuesday. And then they're playing 2 out of 3s.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be bothered with Pep Roulette when their players are so expensive. I just cannot be bothered at all. It's going to be a nightmare for the Premier League game as it is, let alone have to worry about them on this.
Yeah.
Obviously whoever plays, they're probably going to win every game or do well in every game. There's going to be goal scorers. The game for me is meant to be fun. So I don't really have a lot of fun with those Man City games, and especially when you pile so much into them. And then when you see the team sheet just before the game, it happened so many times last year, and it's like, oh, he's not even playing. He's not playing. He's not playing. It is fine on a Tuesday, because on a Tuesday you can kind of have that thing where, oh, well, I haven't played. I've got half my team to play the next day, so I can put someone else in. And they might do well, but if they're playing a Wednesday and you're looking and one of your players has got like a 1 or 2 pointer, like if one of your players has got a 1 or 2 pointer and then you've got Mahrez on the bench and you're like, well, what do I do now? Do I put him on for the upside of him coming off the bench and scoring? Or especially if it's someone with a 2 pointer and you're like, well, I could bring him on, he could do nothing. I've just lost a point. And it's like, well, you've then got to start working out, well, risk versus reward and all this sort of stuff. Just for the group stages, when there are so many good players, not really. Not really too much. If you want to go with Man City players, I'll never say anything against it because they'll likely hit, but I'd just rather go elsewhere. Enough about them. We all know about them. Olympiakos. They've had an interesting transfer window. They've lost a stalwart on their midfield in Gilham, holding midfielder. Might have an effect on them. Tsimikas went to Liverpool, the left back. Emre Mor was on loan. Just went back to Spain. Could play on the right wing. As far as the transfers in, they've signed a player called Pepe in centre midfield who hasn't even been getting a game. They've got Ruben Vinagre from Wolves at left back. Jan Villa has been playing a lot, holding midfielder. He's played the last 3 games. So they've signed him in. He looks to have got off to a good start. and they've also bought Bruma, left winger, who is yet to break into the side. They're third in the Greek Super League with a game in hand. They've had a really good start of the season. They've won 1-0, 3-0, 2-0, 2-0, and then they've drawn the following 2 games 0-0 and 1-1. So defensively, they look like they can hold it together. That being said, obviously, you want to look at the state of opposition, but they have played 2 Champions League qualifiers so far. So I think, again, like we did previously on a previous podcast, we can look at the teams and how they performed in those games. It's probably a better metric because the teams that they played in the Greek league so far, they've not been, one of the bigger names. So they've won 2-0, like I say, drawn 0-0. In those games, they've changed the goalkeeper. So Sarr played 3 of the last 4 games, but then Soklas came in for the last game. Not too sure what's happened there. Rafinha seems to be pretty solid at fullback. De Silva's came in for 1 game. Semedo has played every game. I thought my computer broke at one point because they've got 2 centre-backs called P. Cisse and Bar, who are Newcastle's strike force from the Alan Pardew era of Papi Cisse and Demba Ba. I was like, what is going on here? Didn't know if just in their old age they'd done a Dion Dublin and moved into centre-back, which I would pay good money to see them 2 play centre-back in their mid-30s, quite happily. Holobas is their starting left-back, absolutely nailed on. So between those, Sarr is 4.5 million and Holobas is 4.5 million. I think Holobas is probably a good shout at 4.5 million. When he played for Watford, he got a couple of red cards, but he was also likely for a goal and assist. He hasn't had one in the last 4 games. So form-wise, he's not been evident of that. But they seem to be quite defensively solid. Again, in a group of misfits, really, like Marseille, Porto, a vulnerable Man City. So if you're looking for a punty 4.5 million, Holobas could be the one, or the goalkeeper. I'd go with Sarr over Soklas. Just he has played 3 of the last 4 games, and he did play in those Champions League games, which is obviously the most important thing. Going through the team, they don't really have too much of a talisman. The most I could see is El Arabi. He's started 3 of the last 4 games. He scored 3 goals in the last 4 games. After coming on off the bench as a substitute in that first game. They've got Mathieu Valbuena, who seems to be their penalty taker, playing on the wing. I had a look. 7 million seems really pricey for him. And as well, El Arabi's 8 million. It seems really pricey for some of their players. And I couldn't really see any other sort of outstanding value. Like I say, Jan Villa and Kamara seem to be the most nailed on in midfield, with them. Bouchalakis as well, who got an assist, but price-wise, they didn't look very appealing. So I'd probably just stay clear there. And like I say, look at Sarah Holobas at 4.5. That would be my recommendation. But
yeah, I don't. Olympiakos were one of them teams as well, where they're kind of hard to fit into your team because of their price. And I think it's just one of them things where, like, the game is trying to appeal to the whole of Europe, and so they're trying to appeal to like the Greek fans but knowing that the Greek fans are going to be like, right, I know Olympiakos, I know, like, we watch them every week, let's put these players in. And I think that's what the risk is. Just trying to appeal to and try not to upset masses of countries' fans.
Yeah, but I think, like, it's not. For me, what I'd like out of the game is for these players to be cheaper so that I can have them in my team and go for a couple of big options, make other players more expensive. Like Lewandowski could be 13, Messi could be 13, especially with like Messi's group. And then having some cheaper options so that I'm watching games that I wouldn't usually watch going, I've got assets in this game. I'm going to learn, like, as an excuse to, watch other games outside of the elite teams. Because that's what I've been doing, especially with all the Premier League games being on TV. When you've got an asset in a team, it's like, well, yeah, I want to watch how they're doing. Or if there's someone on your radar, you want to watch them, get the eye test as well. It'd just be more interesting. And it would allow us to like support, we're always going to support the underdog anyway. So when Olympiakos play, I mean, to be fair, I think for this group, there's not much of an underdog anyway. But let's say, Lokomotiv Moscow are playing. Like, we're probably going to say, yeah, like, hopefully we want them to win or something, but would actually cheer goals if one of our assets are playing and they're at a reasonable price. And they might actually do something for once. But it's a game where I think so many players just will be on 0% ownership because they're like El Arabi at 8 million. Gomez at Atlanta's 8.5.
Yeah. Like, there's definitely the when you compare it to the rest of the teams, that's where the clear-cut choices happen, but it's whether a lot of people are willing to do that. Hopefully we can help people do that through these podcasts.
Yeah. Like I say, for their defense, Sa, Rafinha, Semedo, Bar, Holobas seems to be their preferred starting like sort of back four and goalkeeper. So if you were looking to get in, I'd go on them. Kamara and Villa, Bushakalis seem to be the starting three in midfield. El Arabi, Valbuena are the 2 out of the 3 in those attacking positions. So if you are going to go on Olympiakos, those are the players to go for. Try and avoid the others and make your own decision on price points and value and where you want to get the points from in those.
Yeah. So Marseille, they had this is probably the hardest team that I had to do, not because of trying to do research into the Ligue 1. It's mostly because of all the red cards that they have had. So it's hard to judge who actually plays, because they had the disaster. Well, they won the game, but they had the big fight with Paris Saint-Germain. So they had 2 players sent off. Then they had Dimitri Payet sent off 3 minutes after he scored in the last game. So they've just had multiple red cards. So it's hard to see from this stage, even though they've played 6 games, who is their preferred 11. And so, like, it's hard to judge who I would actually want from this team. There's a couple of familiar faces from Premier League watchers. You've got Thauvin. I think that's how he's pronounced. Used to play for Newcastle.
Thauvin.
Yeah. He is probably the talisman of the team. He's
absolutely.
He's went leaps and bounds since he's left Newcastle for Marseille. He's definitely and rightly so, he's the most expensive player in this team. You've got Dimitri Payet, who West Ham fans probably still hate. I don't know, it's a love-hate depending on the fan, but he's still on set pieces. You can produce a moment of brilliance, or you can be very, very average. It's kind of hard to judge, but as a result of that, he's 8 million. And with this team, it's kind of hard to look at some players and go, absolute bargain, because again, it's comparing Ligue 1 to the Champions League. So from what I was looking at the team, Marseille are not in very good form. They lost 2-0 after beating Paris, and then they've drew 1-1 3 games in a row.
Yeah.
So they've not really got going as a team. And me personally, I think the red cards are a result of that. But
Yeah, I agree. I think we're seeing skewed data because of the red cards. But also, I've found a couple. I think I found two players. I've got on my list Tovan at 8.5, far too much. Sanson at 7. He's got a goal and an assist in their last 5 games. But the two players that stand out to me seem to have played in the last 5 games. So just to quickly go through that, Mandanda started the last every game in goal. Sakai, Gonzalez, Kaleta Carr all started in defence. And in midfield, Kamara. Now, there's 2 of the players I want to talk about there. So Kaleta Carr has 2 goals from set pieces and is a 4.5 million centre-back. But also, Kamara, he's a 4.5 million midfielder who was actually a defender on the game, but he plays every game in central midfield. So if you're looking for an out-of-position player, Kamara's the one. Like, he might get plenty of recovery points and is also in line to get those clean sheet points if they do get a clean sheet, just by playing higher up the field. He plays in a holding position, really, within that central midfield. They've changed their formation a lot, Marseille. So far this season, they've used a 4-3-3, a 4-4-2, a 4-2-3-1, and a 4-1-4-1. So until they have a consistency in how they play, then they're not going to get a consistency in results. But I think we've hit on it. They've had so many red cards. When I was looking through, it was a joke. Mm-hmm. So that's been really difficult to sort of get a grasp on it. I wouldn't go for any of their actual listed midfielders or forwards because they don't seem to be consistent, other than maybe, like I say, Sanson and Tovan and Payet, but they're too expensive. But I think it's Kaleta Carr for a 4.5 million centre-back, or like I say, Kamara, 4.5 million playing in midfield. That'd be where I'd personally go. They have brought in, is it Cousins from Bayern Munich? Mm-hmm. In centre midfield, they brought him in. Brought Nagatomo in at left back. He's played 2 of the last 3 games, but he seems to be sharing with Amavi. But I think Amavi was one of the players that got sent off at some point, which is what I'm talking about. Like, this left back position's a mess. They brought in Gonzalez as a centre back, and he's played every game. So he's their new signing, started every game. So you can have a look at those. But like I say, Kaleta Carr and Kamara at 4.5. That'd be where I'd be looking at. Pumping 8.5 million into Tovan. It's a no from me.
Yeah, pretty much. Especially when you can, for 0.5 more, get them 2 players that you're talking about if you want to double up on Marseille. And then you can spend more money on a better forward. You can upgrade a midfielder. You can afford Ramos now. Yeah, there's all sorts of possibilities.
Yeah. Getting into Porto. Porto are another mess. The reason why they're a mess is they've had a fairly good start, played 4 games, won 3 of them, lost 1. So they've beaten Benfica 2-1 in their version of the Portuguese Super Cup. They've beaten Braga 3-1. They've also won 5-0. So it's all sounding good. They lost the last game 3-2. But the issue that they've got is they've been consistent with their starting 11, and 2 of those starting 11 have just been sold. So, and then even surrounding that, they've had players sold. So the 2 consistent starters that they've sold are Tellez, who, by the way, has 2 goals from the penalty spot and 2 assists in those 4 games. And Pereira, who's went to PSG, holding midfielder. We saw last season what taking Partey out of the Athletic team did to them. Like, it can't be underestimated, the effect of taking a player out of a team and thinking, oh, well, it's just a holding midfielder. Like, if Paris Saint-Germain want him, he's a good player, and Danilo Pereira is a really, really good player. They've sold Fabio Silva and Vitinha to Wolves. Zilois is gone, as we mentioned in a previous podcast. Suarez, the centre forward's gone. Osorio, the centre back's gone. Abu Bakar is gone. Andre Pereira, centre forward's gone. Casillas is retired. And the players that they brought in don't really inspire too much confidence. They've gotten Evan Nielsen, a Brazilian centre forward. Felipe Anderson, who couldn't get a game for West Ham, who on his day can be superb, but what day will that be? Malang Sarr, who is a really highly rated upcoming centre-back signed on loan from Chelsea, but he's still really young and he's not a finished article at all. And then Everton or Everton, I'm not too sure how to pronounce it. Again, another young Brazilian centre midfield. I don't know how these players are going to transition to replace such pivotal figures like Telles and Pereira. And that is a concern that I kind of maybe want to steer clear. But they do have a few players that you might want to have a look at because of the price point and maybe what they've done. So we'll start with Torvan's, what's it called? Tuxedo buddy, Chancellor Mbemba. He's played the last 4 games at centre-back. He's scored 2 goals. So he's clearly a threat from set pieces. In a 4.5 million, like I say, he could be like a good little lock into that team. But I am a little bit nervous. Just again, we saw last year how taking an impulse midfielder out, what that can do to a defence. Manafa at 5 million, he plays as a fullback. He gets forward quite a bit, and he's got an assist. But clearly, all the emphasis was on Telles at left back. I don't know whether that'll swing to the right back now, where Manafa's got more of a job to do. I think at 5 million is probably a bit much. Oliveira has been in all right form. He's got 2 goals and an assist in his last 4 games. That 5-0 game seemed to have, like, obviously twisted a few stats around because Corona got a goal and assist. Mariga got a couple of goals. Otavio got an assist. But if we're looking at consistency, I'll probably say Mbemba, Oliveira, maybe Otavio. He got an assist a few games ago as well. But their main starting 11, like even their goalkeeper's changing. Costa's played 2 games of the last 4. Marquessen's played 2 games of the last 4. Like, I'm not too sure about that. I'd go, if you were looking to get into this team, like I say, the defense seems pretty nailed on. I'm interested to see who the left back is. Whoever the left back is for the next game, look at their price point, because if they come in at next to nothing to replace Telles, that could be really, really interesting. But I just don't know who it is yet because I haven't played. Beyond that, I'd probably avoid players like Mariga are too expensive, really. Like, when the forwards on this game are ridiculous, and you've got some players that are midfielders getting bumped up to forwards for no good reason. There's enough choices without having to go into like 7.5, 8 million plus on punts. I think you're going to be spending that much money on a player, you kind of want to know what you're getting for your money.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. This is a team that I'm probably not going to put in just because of the price points. I feel like this team it's more expensive than most of the Salzburg team, and I'd rather have Salzburg players. So
they're in a handy group. The thing is with this group, it's someone's going to win big by picking a couple of these players.
Yeah.
Because I know it sounds obvious, but every single game that's played, someone's winning points. And when the teams are so even, like Olympiakos, Marseille, and Porto, you're a better person than me if you think you can predict the scores of these games. I think we can predict how some games may go in terms of Porto seem to be more attacking. Olympiakos will sit and try and defend, and Marseille do their best to just not get players sent off. But beyond that, like, trying to predict who it is the biggest risk. But if you can someone in these games has to get points. So if you're brave and can get the right person, good for you. Like I say, I'd probably prefer to go for a more tried and tested forward line that have still got easy groups as well, and allow people, like, I just think I'll miss so many points in this group, and I'll probably lose patience and be like, after 2 games, nah, he's rubbish, and then he'll score in the next game, and it just gives a headache.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but again, what we were saying before in previous episodes, if you want to check out the other previews for the group stages, check out our other podcast or videos on our channel. Our Twitter handle is at UCL Fantasy Pod. Our YouTube, the main event, a Fantasy Champions League podcast. You can see all of the episodes there, and check out the other group previews so that we can help you make decisions based on your team and all these crazy prices.
Yeah, we'll be going through after all these are done, just before the season starts, we'll be doing team reveals. We'll be inviting a couple of friends on, see what mad choices they've gone for this year. And we'll probably also, I think we should do another episode on the rules. I've seen a lot of people getting involved that haven't played before.
Okay.
So I think it'd be quite good to go through the rules again on an episode, but that's for another day. The next podcast will be Group D, flying through these quite nicely. So we'll see you all then. Bye.